Today, I'm talking about effective design, examples I've seen of effective design manifest through permaculture. And there are so many to talk about. There's projects I've been involved with, there's projects I've seen, there's projects of friends and family. But a few of the ones that really stand out is, first is Richard Walker's Dragon Eye's nursery. So Dragon's Eye was a nursery that he created late 70s, early 80s in British Columbia near Grand Forks. And Richard was an organic farmer in the 70s in Alberta, which was a hard thing to be. But there was pesticide spray over that was happening all the time by his farm with his neighbors. And the overspray, year one killed the tops of his shelter belt trees, year two killed the tops of his fruit trees, and then year three really started to affect his fruit. So he decided to move to where that wasn't the case, which was Grand Forks in British Columbia, Canada. And he bought 5 acres of bare horse pasture. And this horse pasture was, as he would find out, infested with bindweed and a very healthy ground squirrel population. But even because of that, over the next 20 years, he created a 7-story food forest that created food and fodder and fiber. He would go on to create a nursery out of that spot, as well as create a fair, healthy number of products because he was a herbalist. And it just showed that anybody with a little bit of enthusiasm and knowledge can really tackle a large-scale project like that basically on his own. These days, Dragon's Eye Nursery has been sold and has been renamed Phil Bellew Forest, but it's just such an incredible example of small, slow solutions, of observing patterns, designing with the climate and the ecosystem in mind. And he really just showed what he could do with that. And with that type of initiative, I felt like I could go off and really start to apply. One of the things Richard likes to say at the end of his courses is, now go off, grab a stick, make a hole and plant a tree. And so years later, as I was working with Michael Nichols of Seven Ravens Farm, Nursery, and Permaculture Academy, we were teaching 3-month-long permaculture design courses that were immersive. They lived on the farm. They learned all the different attributes of working with that farm. And once a year, I think he ran it 2 or 3 times a year, we would then go over to Africa and we would apply a project there. And Michael had been developing and creating incredible projects in Africa for years and had met a farmer there, Josephat Barasa, JB, and really wanted to change the model. They'd been going and had been installing these food gardens in schools. And instead he wanted to create a training center where the school teachers could come to and then go off and do their own projects. So I went over with a group of students and Michael, and on 1/4 of an acre, we created the Practical Permaculture Institute of Kenya, a 1/4 acre demonstration site that harvested all of the water necessary for the site, from rainwater plus the water that came down the road, had an incredible first pond that had a silt trap in it, and then overflowed and then fed all of these different diversionary ditches and a few swales with banana circles. Then came into the center of the site where there was a secondary pond that was redundant water for a tree nursery. There was the kitchen and the dormitory. And then came into this monster pond that was dug by hand with multiple layers to make sure that the water didn't overheat and then evaporate. And finally, the composting toilets, and then going out and off into the next sector. It was an incredible site that first year had like 160 people who came to learn about permaculture, 160 teachers, and then took that information back to their schools. It was this great example of nucleated design that could exponentially beget itself, just like seeds do. And I learned an incredible amount about this. If you're interested about the project, if you take a look at the portfolio section at allpointsdesign.ca, you can take a look at it there. The last one I want to talk about is Springridge Commons, which was a food forest designed by Jeff Johnson after he came back from Ladakh. Jeff had come back learning about permaculture, wanted to apply it in his local area of Fernwood. And there was this lot, gravel lot, that was being used by the local school board for bus parking, had who knows what coming from the buses dripping down, hydrocarbons, petrochemicals. And over the course of many years, he transformed it into this incredible edible space. Springridge Commons became a place to be and a place to interact with. And while the intent of the design was exceptional, it was created within a social structure of people who didn't quite understand why it was so incredible and why it was so important. And so it attracted a lot of people who would want to be there and interact there, sometimes people who were homeless, sometimes people who were addicts and were going there to partake in their addictions. And the general community had issues with the fact that it became an attractant for life, if you will. But Springridge Commons still persists today. It's an incredible site. I highly recommend people check it out because it just goes to show what a few people can do who are very motivated, very enthusiastic, and have the right design mind as Jeff did. Thanks for listening.